Alright, yeah, so George R. R. Martin made an update on his website recently, and it's what we're going to analyze a little bit here in this video. He's discussing the Dunk and Egg upcoming series, aka A Night in the Seven Kingdoms, based on his novellas. But he adds in a small but potentially crucial mention of the Winds of Winter, so I'm going to share with you some concerns that I have, but maybe there's something else here, and that we've become so skeptical, maybe a lot of people, myself included, maybe we're overlooking something. So let's read that real quick, and then I'll get into why I think we're running into a lot of problems as fans, and why maybe we should change the way we're looking at things. George writes, "Things are moving along nicely with our Dunk and Egg spinoff, HBO's adaptation of my novella, The Hedge Knight. Most of the auditions, not all, but most, are done, and we should be able to announce some more cast members shortly. We have our Tansel, Steely Pate, Baylor Breakspear, The Laughing Storm, a couple of Fossaways, Arian Brightflame, Boo, Hiss, Prince Makar, and the rest. Lists are being built on Ashford Meadow. I am told they just had the first table read and it went great. And our youngest star can't wait to start. Here's Dexter turning to egg." I love it. The Hedge Knight will be a lot shorter than Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, with a much different tone, but it's still Westeros, so no one is truly safe. Ira Parker and his team are doing a great job. I hope to visit the shoot come July when I swing by Belfast on my way to the Worldcon in Glasgow. The show will make its debut next year. And if it does well, The Sworn Sword and The Mystery Knight will follow, by which time I hope to have finished some more Dunk and Egg stories. Yes, after I finish The Winds of Winter. Now, I'd be dishonest to make this seem all that bad. I think Dunk and Egg should do really well, and the idea of it being a smaller story I think will give the Game of Thrones universe a very nice change of pace, offering us a much tighter story that will emphasize much more intimacy with those characters, primarily Sir Duncan de Tall and Aegon V. These novellas are very popular among A Song of Ice and Fire fans, and I've even heard a few fans say that even though they don't want to hear about George writing anything else until The Winds of Winter is complete, more Dunk and Egg novellas would be an exception. I disagree, but I'd be happier with that over, say, A Fire and Blood Part 2, but that's also preference of what you would want as a second place choice. The problem here is what George said at the very end about writing more novellas for Dunk and Egg, and if you're unfamiliar with the trilogy of novellas, spoiler alert, the story is not finished. There's only 3, and George has commented on writing anywhere from 6 to even 12 total novellas to complete his story. So with this comes a concern for Dunk and Egg, and I believe these are easier for George to write and they're much smaller, more focused narratives. It is an incomplete story, and like Game of Thrones, that could cause problems unless George is working much closer with showrunners to maintain the spirit of Dunk and Egg story, or if he's currently writing more novellas. And well, what does this mean for, of course, The Winds of Winter, and if I dare say, A Dream of Spring? Of course, George has stated that he's not going to write any more novellas before The Winds of Winter is completed, and if I wanted to leave you with a sense of optimism, it would be that George thinks he's not just going to complete The Winds of Winter. He's remained consistent with statements suggesting he'll finish the entire A Song of Ice and Fire series. Further, in this post, he does suggest that he would like to finish writing some novellas to support the Dunk and Egg series beyond The Mystery Knight, and after completing The Winds of Winter. And as delusional as you or me or anyone might think that that is, it's what he believes, and I suppose that's kind of the most important thing. I worry about the future of Dunk and Egg after the 3rd season or the Mystery Knight adaptation, however they decide to format it for TV. And I also am very worried that any focus on Dunk and Egg from George will be detrimental to A Song of Ice and Fire getting at least the 6th book. I worry about House of the Dragon without enough of George's influence or characterization. I worry that there's no way a 75-year-old man is going to be able to offer his consultation on all of these current HBO projects, future projects, complete The Winds of Winter, jot down a few more Dunk and Egg novellas, and not to mention however they decided to go forward with the Aegon the Conqueror adaptation, whether a show or a movie, then finish A Dream of Spring, but who knows. I do truly believe that George truly believes he can accomplish all of these things. Kind of like that scene with Alistair Thorne in Game of Thrones 4th season.
Do you know what leadership means, Lord Snow? It means that the person in charge gets second-guessed by every clever little twat with a mouth. But if he starts second-guessing himself, that's the end. For him, For the clever little twats. For everyone.
And you know what? Originally, I was going to stop right here in the video and say that maybe we are waiting in vain and stop getting your hopes up or something to that effect. Then I decided that actually there's just too much negativity here and sometimes I shouldn't contribute to that and I don't want to contribute to that, and decided to not release this video and stop recording and stop writing down my thoughts. But then another YouTuber that maybe you're familiar with, or if not, I recommend you check out, is The Dragon Demands, who has content on various developments on the production of House of the Dragon, and before that with Game of Thrones, among other content, where he does really get some insights and does a deep dive on some other production behind the scenes stuff. I always find that very fascinating. But a recent video he put out addressing this latest blog from George R. R. Martin really did align with my initial thoughts, my first feeling when I first read that blog post. But he concluded absolutely what I originally thought before I second guessed it and went into my skeptical brain, and that is George is talking like someone who believes The Winds of Winter will not just be published, but published soon. George discusses writing multiple novellas to go along with The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but states that he's not writing anything until he finishes The Winds of Winter. Dragon Demands dove deeper in referencing other supporting materials that George has paused for anything that is a tie-in to A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, I take that to suggest that George is anticipating The Winds of Winter to possibly contradict other tie-in material, so he wants that paused until The Winds is published. If I think about this more broadly, holding off on these other projects is also pausing revenue for publishers. And it just seems reasonable to assume that he would only do that if he were close to turning in his manuscript pages. Granted, George did this a year ago, but considering the financial bottom line impact for other commissioned writers, this isn't nothing. And then when we combine that with how casually, and if I dare say matter-of-factly, George discusses The Winds of Winter being done before he finishes more novellas, plural as in multiple novellas, A Night in the Seven Kingdoms will be on your TV screens in a year. And say it takes George 6 months to a year to write each novella, George is planning to not just be writing these novellas soon, but to have them completed relatively soon as well, and yet he's remained firm that he's not writing anything before he completes The Winds of Winter. Look, when I first read the blog post from George, I was excited and I thought just maybe, but I quickly went into my skeptical brain and began to roll my eyes. And you know, I'm sure I might get some comments telling me how Winds will never be completed, and I can't blame you. After all, one of my very first videos on this channel was about how Winds probably won't ever come out. But I'm going to decide to be hopeful. Dragon Demand suggested a late 2024 release, and you know, I'm all for the positive outlook. If I could just transition from nihilism to cautiously optimistic, how painful can it be if we're let down? We're the same fan base that endured the assassination of numerous characters in Game of Thrones' last few seasons. I think we can endure being wrong about Winds not coming out for Christmas this year. I've made a few videos about how I have a lot of doubt about The Winds of Winter coming out, and I guess this is me officially saying I might be changing my mind or changing my expectations. I'd much rather those videos age poorly than this one. Again, I do encourage you to check out Dragon Demand's video on this subject, and I'll put a link in the video description. Now, let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best. Why not? Thanks for watching.